Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Another week. Welcome, Michael.
Welcome, Jackie, or hello, Jackie. Greetings to everyone. Best wishes to everyone. Unless you've got something to say, Jackie, I'll
No, roll with the material, and I'll comment as questions arise.
Okay, good. The usual. All right, so we begin today's 38th podcast, everyone, being part 3 of chapter 18, which summarises the teachings of Krishna throughout the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, aimed at eventual liberation through renunciation of any person who's seeking the ultimate truth of who they are, what's the purpose of life, and what happens at the time of death. In the last podcast, we looked closely at the aspect of action, with its 3 divisions of knowledge, action, and the actor, the doer. Remember, we did that at length, Jackie. And then we added on to that 3 other topics, related aspects, the buddhi, the conviction, and happiness. Every action that we perform as human beings, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, is all aimed at giving us what we call happiness. And for most people, that word of happiness is not understood clearly, and is often mistaken for pleasure. And pleasure and happiness are 2 totally separate things. Pleasure's fleeting, they're constantly changing, whereas true happiness, in the sense of these teachings of the great masters, is constant. It's everlasting, never changes, never gets better or less. It's permanent. So that's the big difference between what we're talking about here in that reference to happiness. So he's saying every action we perform is done only to gain happiness. All beings join this endless hunt, but very few find it. Those who achieve everlasting happiness end all sorrow in their life. So that's the bonus of achieving true happiness. It ends any sorrow that any being experiences. Doesn't mean there's none there. It ends that you don't get attached to it or involved in it. Because the sorrow can end up controlling the being in whatever particular situation they find themselves in. So in a very interesting passage, Krishna next talks about the 3 guna qualities or types of happiness or pleasure or joy, which bring about the end of this pain and suffering for individual. So he's again relate to the 3 gunas in this reference to happiness. He starts off with sattvic happiness and describes that. Sattvic happiness, he says, is steady and continuous effort day by day will surely lead any person to the end of all sorrow. At first, it seems like poison. This is a brilliant piece in the teaching talking about poison and nectar. And he says, at first, it feels like poison when we start on our spiritual journey. And people often think, well, that's crazy. That now doesn't really feel like poison. But I'll explain what that means. Because the new effort and continuous practice of controlling the senses, detachment and meditation seems strange and painful at the start. So the people, when we start, we get a sense of, hey, there's going to be a bit involved in this, and it seems a bit painful. It's enough to put a lot of people off right from the very beginning. That's just where the aspect of courage, Jackie and listeners, comes in very strongly. To have started on this journey, everyone listening, has required an enormous amount of courage to begin with, and then has required an enormous amount of continuous courage to keep going on the spiritual journey. So he says, but with conviction, perseverance, and increasing use of buddhi, it all starts to turn around. So what began as a hard task for the seeker, which seemed like poison, now culminates in the supreme happiness of drinking God's nectar. So it starts off hard, but as we get into it and work through it, it gets easier and easier. The rewards are more evident for us, the benefits and so on. We become happier, more contented, less stressed and so on. And happier, true happiness in this sense. And then we increase our yearning for that eventual final union. It no longer seems a chore or something too far in the distant. It starts to become a more palatable, more imminent for the being.
I'm just
And we
having a moment of soaking that up right now, because I was just thinking earlier, and maybe because this week I've had a more challenging week, a bit more emotion, a little bit concern over mortality and, lifespan and that sort of thing. So it's been a little bit rattled from all of that. And part of me, as you began to speak earlier today, I was just thinking, oh, it's kind of like we have so much as human beings, so much pain and suffering and turmoil as we go, life after life after life, and thinking, by the time we finally achieve self-realization, well, that's it. You finish your life and you don't come back. And part of me was just thinking, God, so we're kind of cheated a little bit. But you've reminded me that actually it's the accumulative thing, that life after life, the more we can master this, the better it gets. We do have more true happiness and true joy. The journey gets easier until it culminates in that final point. I needed to hear that.
Well, you heard it loud and clear, and you repeated it almost word for word, Jackie. So that's perfect. That's beautiful. That's for everyone listening. What Jackie just said there echoes the words I've been saying. She obviously puts it slightly differently, but it's exactly the same, and it's truthful. It's truthful, and I'm glad, I'm delighted that um, it just resonated that a little bit more clearly and a little bit more strongly, Jackie. So that's lovely. And now when I talk about the rajasic happiness, it'll be the reverse. So it'll make it a more complete picture for all our listeners. Um, Krishna now goes on to talk about describing rajasic happiness. And he says this arises when the senses contact sense objects which seem at first to be pleasurable nectar. So the senses, whatever we see, hear, smell, touch, oh, that's nice, that looks nice, tastes nice, whatever it might be. So it's all like nectar. It's all beautiful. Um, um, but it goes on to say, but in the end, it becomes bitter as poison. So often we don't achieve what it is that started off really nice and we wanted it. And sometimes we only half achieve or even three-quarter, but we're not satisfied because we didn't get the full achievement. So there's always something missing out of it one way or another. Or we get it, but then it runs away from us. It disappears. You strive hard for a business, and after 20 years, it goes belly up for whatever reason, usually these days because of governments. Um, but marriages or relationships, this sort of stuff, it's all the same. All has the same sort of aspect. While it lasts, we feel happy, but when it disappears for one reason or another, well, then it leads to sadness. This reference to poison. So he goes on to describe this rajasic happiness. He says the sensual rajasic pleasures are fleeting, fiercely driven by a desirous mind. Jesus says, as you sow, so you shall reap. So if it's all desire driven, same in this teaching, there's going to be unhappy consequences in it. And he says, even though most take this path, they can save themselves. And this is a bit of encouragement for anyone that's still dabbling too much in that rajasic realm and is trying to get out of it. He just puts in a lovely little gentle and soft reminder here for everyone. That you've got an opportunity through whatever suffering you're going through, learning from the scriptures and also from other people's experience. So even the comments you're making in this aspect of your personal sort of trauma that you're facing, Jackie, it's an opportunity for anyone listening that might either be facing a similar thing or will somewhere in the future have a memory of listening to this podcast and saying, oh, Jackie tackled it. She said sometimes she cried, but she also understood that there was a karmic aspect to it, and that the knowledge was serving her well, and things like that. And it'll be sort of an example to other people. So we learn a lot, don't we, from people that we know? Oh, geez, they made a real blue there, and our parents or our friends and that warn us. They say, "Oh, be careful. I went through that 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 20 years ago. Just be careful of these sorts of traps, that sort of stuff." So that's what he means by learning from other people's examples. And then he refers to the last of the gunas, the tamasic happiness. It says is delusive both in the beginning and at the end. So basically, you're saying it's poison at the start, poison all the way through, and still poison at the end. It doesn't have any positive outcomes. It arises from a dull and listless mind, continuously coming and going. Its signs are oversleeping, laziness, folly, and taking intoxicants. A lot of those people have not only alcohol or drugs, but also prescription drugs, sleeping tablets, and those sorts of things, all to cloud the mind and try and give them some peace and some happiness in or solace in that sort of regard. Its signs are oversleeping, laziness, folly, and taking intoxicants. Sorry, I read that. And the perverse enjoyment that comes from idle pursuits and neglect of duty. They actually, many of them enjoy what they're going through. We as observers think, oh, I'd hate to be going through that. But in their own perverse way, they don't, it seems normal or natural to them and so on. Anything you'd like to say there on this aspect of happiness? That's where that finishes, Jackie.
No,
Or
that's
any other comment?
no, not at this
No?
point.
All right. So Krishna now refers to the four castes. Um, Now, many of the listeners, I'm sure, have got some idea of India and the four castes and, very rigid and so on. Let me say right from the start that Krishna's teachings or the traditional teachings of the four caste system is nothing like it still might exist in parts of India or in the Middle East. They have a similar one in the Muslim, Islamic sort of religion. It all comes from misunderstanding. But here Krishna is describing the four caste system as it was originally intended and meant, and it's simply saying that society worldwide in any country or nation groups the people in it according to their karmic tendencies and their guna tendencies. So some are more like what I'll describe the Brahmins. Well, I'll just go straight into describing it, Jackie. That's a quicker way, simpler
Yeah,
way to do it.
excellent.
Krishna now refers to the four caste system as an example of how people can pursue the world of work in a manner which contributes to their spiritual growth by carrying out their prescribed duties in a society according to their dominant guna quality and their karmic personality or nature. So karma and your personality, nature, they go hand in hand automatically anyway, but they're the two aspects that divide people into these four basic groups. Now, everyone can have some aspects of all of them, but it's like the gunas, or your left got two hands, but you're predominantly right-handed, or you're predominantly left-handed, but you still use the other one. Two halves of our mind, the left and the right brain. So all of those things, well, it's a similar aspect. So everyone's got basically all or can have all qualities, but we're talking people who are predominantly in each of these categories. And I'm sure everyone will understand very clearly. He describes in detail the responsibilities of each caste and stresses that no particular group is superior to any other. Now, in the current sort of caste systems that operate in different parts of the world, there's a definite superiority that this person's less than others and whatever. Yeah. In one of the castings, the lower caste that we'd call tamasic, they're referred to as untouchables. So you don't want to have anything to do with them. They're sort of like almost vermin, that sort of aspect. Well, that doesn't apply in any of the great masters' teachings or stuff like that. We keep coming back, always need to remind ourselves that every human being is made in the image of God and is one of God's children. Some are misbehaving and playing up quite badly, but they will learn through karma to sort themselves out over a number of lifetimes. So he says each of these groups have a role to play in society, and this is the aim of it, is for society to operate in a calm, peaceful, cooperative manner that'll cater for everyone and give everyone comfort and peace and a good quality of life. It's a high ambition, and when I look around the world, I see we're far from it in many parts of the world, even in our own country. But this is the ideal that every individual and every nation eventually should be striving for and wanting to achieve. So the first ones of the caste that he refers to is called in Sanskrit the Brahmins. We could refer to them as the spiritual teachers, our religious sort of leaders like popes and cardinals, in the Christian teaching, monks and priests, nuns, all of those people who dedicate in one way or another most of their life into that field come under this heading of Brahmins. They must have spirit. These are the qualities that they should have. They must have spiritual knowledge and wisdom, serenity, purity, calmness, forgiveness, and an unwavering faith in God. Very, very important one. Their primary purpose is to provide spiritual and moral leadership. So they've got a vital role to play in society. We talk about role models. Well, these are basically, in the teaching, regarded or understood to be the highest role models in the society, and they should be providing that sort of these sorts of qualities that I'm outlining. So their primary purpose is to provide spiritual and moral leadership, to guide the leaders and the rulers, and to help transform society's exemplary human beings into godly beings. So that last line refers to people like us that are on the path of truth. They're supposed to be giving us guidance as to how we continue on becoming more divine beings. The other very important aspect there is that in the original way of society supposed to operate, that the next caste, which is the rulers, the presidents and the prime ministers and the dictators and so on, are supposed to take notice of the teachings of the Brahmins when they're making decisions and things like that, confer with them. Whereas these days, in most cases, the Kshatriyas, the rulers, think that they're the highest caste, that they're basically God, and they speak the truth and know what the truth is. So they basically ignore that whole area. And one of the reasons they ignore them is because that other area is not doing their job properly either. But I'll make reference to that in a few minutes. So the second grouping, the Kshatriyas in Sanskrit, but that means in English translation, the rulers, the leaders, the warriors, and the soldiers. Their job's to rule and guard the welfare and prosperity of the people, to lead by example with mortal stamina, courage, firmness, and resourcefulness and ingenuity in the force of changing conditions, to inspire the population and to strictly police law and order to protect the citizens. Powerful, clear statements, aren't they, Jack? He says both these two groups, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, are naturally strong in their own ways. And he says the Brahmin caste is strong. Their strength lies in their spiritual glow. In other words, the sattvic energy they're supposed to be putting out, and that glows. It makes you feel confident in what they're saying, and it inspires you to sort of follow their examples and so on. The Kshatriyas, their strength lies in their courage, having the courage to do what it says there, inspire the population, strictly police law and order, protect society. They should have the courage and the conviction to do that. Well, Jackie, for you and the listeners, for what it's worth, my opinion on it is that today's society, almost everywhere around the world, these two groups, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, are doing a pretty dismal job. That's what I think. You could all ponder on that. Yeah, protect the citizens, law and order. in here in Victoria at the moment, we've got a lot of disorder, haven't we? A lot of machete kids and ramming police cars and attacking people in their homes and that sort of stuff. There's no conviction in any leaders wanting to protect their citizens from that sort of stuff. A lot of talk, a lot of hot air, a lot of talk, but talk's meaningless if there's no action that follows it. Anyway, I don't want to sound too pessimistic. They'll be saying here's grumble bum again. So we move on. Third group just refers to the next two, third and fourth in a brief manner, but just to give us it's a easy enough picture to understand. Thirdly, in Sanskrit, they're called the Vaishyas. They're the farmers, the manufacturers, the managerial and business class. So all that financial sector, all the farming, manufacturing, all of that comes under that sort of heading. And there's certain people that have got traits for that, haven't they? Others don't have those sorts of traits, so they don't do that. But everyone will fit into one of these four categories. And the last one, just in case anyone's wondering what that last one is, the first ones in Sanskrit are called Sudras. We in English, in our language, we refer to them as labourers and workers. So they're the people who work in the factories, work on the farms, work in the businesses, the supermarkets, the salespeople, all that sort of stuff. And he says these two groups are the society's providers and servers, and their combined responsibilities are to prepare, supply and equip society with the goods and services it needs. Just think about it, everyone. If there weren't people working in Coles and Woolworths, stacking the shelves, serving you and all that, cutting up the meat in the delicatessen, putting out the fresh fruit and vegetables and stuff like that, how would you go? If there weren't people getting in a truck every day and going to the farm or the dairy farmers' places and sucking out the milk and putting it into the van and taking it to a processing bottling company, and that, where would we be? So all the food we eat, everything that's produced on farms, everything that's handled by the people who handle it one way or another, everything's vital. Everything's, some people entertain the idea, well, I'm a brain surgeon. I'm not having to go at brain surgeons, but, thinking, oh, well, my job's the most important job. Well, their job's no more important job than the person driving the garbage truck and emptying out all your bins. No one comes and collects everyone's rubbish. It all piles up out on the street, and then you've got rats and vermin and disease and all sorts of stuff. So it all makes perfect sense, doesn't it, Jackie and listeners? So that's a quick description, and there's books on it if anyone wants to follow it up for a greater understanding. You can Google the course, the caste system. Just be careful if you do that, because different people will push different sort of aspects, and some, if it's talking about one caste being superior to the other, well, I'd sort of dodge that podcaster or whoever and go to something else. But there's plenty of truthful explanations, which I've briefly outlined there, which I think should resonate with everyone listening and give a clear understanding of how it all works.
It's a clear explanation, and it just reminds me that we're all born with aptitudes. Like, really, we're all born into one of those classifications, depending upon the aptitude that is most dominant within us. And it reminds me of when you come across people that have been raised in a particular family with forceful parents that, really want their child to proceed as a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, and yet the child or young adult has aptitude in some other area, and they get forced into something that they don't have an aptitude for, and often they don't thrive or disaster occurs. No wonder they want to follow their own path, their own aptitude, and end up in their area of choice.
And a lot of people, people sometimes ask me in our conversations, why do the children sort of go along? So you're 18 and whatever, and you're going to uni, and mum and dad, or one of them, maybe both, but one usually, pushing you to go into something, and you do it. And people say, well, you got free will? You could say, no, I don't want to do it. Well, yeah, you could do that, and some do, I'm sure. But but there's also aspects in individuals that, come in under, say, loyalty or love of parents or feeling a duty towards parents. So they sacrifice quite happily, in a sense, their sort of natural desires and what they want to do, because it's going to make mum or dad or both of them happy.
And
But
particularly with different cultural influences,
yes,
like in
yeah.
some cultures, it's expected that you will
Yeah,
follow the
yeah,
parent's word.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And because it's part of society culture, it's more or less the child grows up with it, the children in the society. So it's not all that, as foreign to them as it would be, say, to us in the West. We all think, we grow up, everyone, you can be what you want, you can do what you want, whatever you like. Well, that's a nonsensical thing as well. You can't be what you want always, and you can't do what you want always. You might desire that because you're thinking it's going to give you happiness and that, but it can run loose and wild for many people. So there needs to be, but but basically the teaching is saying the person should follow their instincts. And I've heard of stories and met people who have done what mum and dad wanted, and then when they die, they stop instantly. Even heart surgeons stop being heart surgeons and get a Jim's mowing round because they just love being out in the fresh air and cutting grass and trimming hedges and stuff like that. So it eventually will come out one way or another. Um, but me being your father, Jackie, at one stage in my life, I ventured into um, tropical fish breeding. Yeah. Spent 10 years of my life working very hard, put a lot of money into it, but I wasn't cut out for it. Yeah. I'm a teacher. Um, didn't, I gave it my best shot. But I realised for farmers in particular, anyone working in the land, how you're at the mercy of the elements. Birds were coming in and eating the fish out of the ponds. Some winters were more cold, froze the ponds over and fish died. Other times you'd have a heat wave and the water would get too hot, all the oxygen would get out of it and the fish would suffocate. And so there was trauma, and then they get diseases and all sorts of stuff. There was trauma after trauma. I put up with it for 10 years, and I made some money out of it, but not as much as I hoped to. It was money driven, right? So I was going out of my caste system and going into something because I thought that this would make me more money. Put a lot of effort and 10 years of my life into it. Got a little bit of money, but it wasn't worth it. Had some medical episodes along the way and caused me a lot of unhappiness. And I was breathed an enormous sigh of relief when I finally sold the place and left. So that's just a personal example of my own. And I'm sure many of our listeners could share similar or know similar sort of stories. All right.
That touches a raw nerve in me too, because of course, nothing like knowing you've got cancer or something life-threatening to just reassess your life and where you're at. I mean, I too would regard myself in the teacher category, and I too have a 9 to 5 office job where I survive quite well and contribute effectively. I'm a valued member of the broader team, but there's some dismay in terms of turning up every day because it's not what I feel
Yeah,
like I
yeah,
was born to do, and
yeah,
yet the financial situation requires money coming in. But
yeah.
it's a tricky one to navigate, and nothing
But
like
it
to think that your life might be shorter than you otherwise thought. To think, do I really want to continue doing that? It's
very tricky.
raises big things.
Yeah, very tricky, and tricky also at whatever stage the person's life is in the cycle of lives and deaths. If it's just a continuous cycle with no truthful knowledge that the being's going through, well then it's all over the shop. It's hit and miss and all that sort of stuff. Once we wake up, any person wakes up and starts accessing this truth, well then they can start making different decisions because they got some truthful knowledge to base those changes. But they'll also be gradual, and they'll also need, especially in the society we live in, which is multifaceted. So, you know, because we got electricity and because we live in houses, we've got to pay rates, we've got to insure our houses, you got to pay for your water, electricity, and all sorts of stuff. So that means that by essence, you've got to have a job, you've got to have some income. And you might want to get a job desperately, most people would, in the line that they're more inclined for, but it doesn't present. So you got no choice but to opt for sort of second best. And then you're hoping at the back of your mind that, over the years, a position will arise in what I want to do, and I'll be able to make a jump across. So there are all these difficulties, and everyone. It's not just, oh well, I'm in the leader class, so I'm going to be the leader of this organisation, and I'm going to be the leader of this group, and I'm going to be the leader of that. You might have that, but the opportunities mightn't present. So you're settled for second best or third best sometimes, or even fourth best. And sometimes we can have first best in part of our lives and sometimes second best in other parts. We have to juggle it all around according to our life and our circumstances and so on. And that takes into consideration our partners, husbands or wives, our children, our mums and dads, all those sorts of things come into it as well. Like I know a lot of people, because a lot of the people who are working in these areas tend to be elderly people, and many of them have got the responsibility of looking after older parents, people, parents in their 90s and so on. And they've got to take them to medical appointment. Well, they don't have to, but they love them and want to. So they take them to medical appointments or go and cook meals for them or, help clean the house up. So you're cooking your own family's meals, you're cooking theirs, you're cleaning the house and doing that. These people are very dedicated and loving, kind people, but it adds extra layers to everyone's life one way or another. But it's all part of life, folks. It's we're not grizzling just for the sake of grizzling. We're just saying it as it is, that this is life, and everyone's faced with different things, and everyone's got to learn to deal with it. And the important thing that I'm putting across is that learning to deal with it is much easier and more efficient and beneficial for everyone if you're learning from the truth, not learning from your own beliefs or opinions or likes or dislikes or what the person next door tells you. All right? And so the last bit, Jackie. So in the final segment of this part of the chapter, Krishna teaches Arjuna how the following four spiritual disciplines. So we're going to look now at four spiritual disciplines that Krishna is outlining to Arjuna, which is us, as to how to lead happier lives, or lives leading to give us greater happiness. He says how to follow. He's going to discuss these four spiritual disciplines. When performed diligently by any one of these four castes, will reach Brahman. So that means everyone in the group in the world is one of those four castes predominantly. So he's saying everyone in the world, if they learn to understand and then follow these four disciplines, spiritual disciplines, they'll have a corresponding increase in their happiness in general in life. Yeah. So the first one he refers to is by the discipline of action, karma, discipline of action. He says your guna nature dictates that you perform all your duties and actions according to egoic desires. True yogis do the opposite and devote their actions to the divine. Now, understand clearly, Jackie, devote your actions, meaning you do them because you're doing them for the divine, in the sense of it's for your family or in your job or whatever. But behind it all is you're wanting to please God, a truthful, pure action. By renouncing all egoic attachments, the person becomes an instrument of divinity and attains liberation from the bondage of karma. So this is what happens when we have the discipline in performing the actions in our life. And remember again, everyone, it's not just physical actions like we just tend to think, working with our bodies, but it's mainly mental and emotional actions that take place as well, and sense actions. So he now goes on to talk about the discipline of knowledge, jnana, knowledge, the discipline of knowledge. He says Krishna advises using the pure intellect, the buddhi, to abandon all wayward actions, whether they're physical, sensual, mental, and emotional, which incorporate selfishness, greed, power, arrogance, anger and desire, passions, and so on, thus becoming fit to join the eternal spirit. So he's making it very clear there that the knowledge that we want to operate from, need to operate from to fully achieve what we want to achieve, is the knowledge from stemming from buddhi, not intellectual mind knowledge. Anyone can accumulate that, read books and study and answer exams and get a degree. That's not true knowledge. That's not pure knowledge. Pure knowledge is higher than the thinking intellectual mind. It uses the intellectual thinking mind, but from a positive aspect, from a buddhi aspect. Because if it's only just at the ordinary mental thinking, it's egoic, and so by definition, it's limited. Could be very good, but still limited. Whereas buddhi knowledge is limitless. It's all knowing. So that's what we need to aspire to in the sense of operating from true knowledge, pure knowledge. So he's covered the discipline of action, he's covered the discipline of knowledge. Now he talks about the discipline of devotion, bhakti. They're all very important, Jackie and listeners, all important. All the work we've been studying has referred to all of this. So this is part of the summary that we're now looking at. So he says, by the discipline of devotion, becoming one with the eternal, his soul knows the bliss of the self and surrenders all desires and regrets and neither craves nor grieves anything. By total devotion to me, total love for me, you will see that I am love. This is Krishna speaking. Realizing this truth, you will enter my kingdom. We did a whole chapter on devotion, didn't we, Jackie, listeners? Yeah. Devotion means love, pure love. And when you love God fully, then you love yourself fully because you know that you are God in that sense, and you love every other being fully, and in actual fact, everything else in the creation fully. So he says, by realizing this truth, devotion to me, love for me, you will see I am love. You will enter my kingdom. And then the last one is the discipline of meditation. That'll be pretty clear, I think, to all our listeners. Most of them, if not all of them, are meditating, and you know that requires a lot of discipline. We want to meditate often. We say, oh, I've got to rush off to work. I've left it too late. We meditate in the evening. Oh, I'd like to meditate, but I've got to get the tea ready or put the kids to bed or hear them read. Or now I'm tired and I feel like I just want to watch telly. So it has to be very disciplined for meditation. But meditation eventually spreads out throughout our day, not just in the practice of meditation, as we touched on in meditation. And so you're trying to be in a meditative state, meaning still, and focusing on the now. So he says, do not renounce action itself, only the sense of doership of I and mine. Continue to engage in worldly actions while surrendering them all. Been stressing all the way through the teaching, Jackie and listeners, that we must act. Right from the word go, he's telling Arjuna, you must act. So we've got to act in this lifetime, in the society we live in the world. And he says, well, there's two reasons for that. One is that everything you do will be eventually benefiting someone or other, whether it's the love for the child, taking them to soccer or piano lessons, or whether it's manufacturing something in a factory so that the people can buy it and eat it, or shoes to wear, or whatever it might be. But also, we just looked at last week is that when it's through performing actions that we have our ultimate learning. If we perform them right, correctly, according to truth, we get a feeling of full satisfaction. That's happiness. that we've done what we're supposed to be done and done it the right way. If we don't, well then there'll be some sorrow and some tears, and that gives us an opportunity to learn from it. You gave the example yesterday where, and I said, well, you've observed it. So you said, sometimes I say things or do things and I regret it or wish I hadn't have, or I knew I shouldn't have. Remember that part of the conversation? Well, this is what I'm talking about now. So that's the learning opportunity. So out of every action we perform, physical, mental, or emotional, we have a learning opportunity. If we've learned, well, we don't have to learn anything because it's perfect and gives us great joy and happiness and is of benefit to whoever was involved in it. If we haven't learned, well, it gives us a bit of regret or whatever, and it's not as efficient as it could be or should be for other people. All right. And then the last couple of, or just to finish off meditation, he says, so he's saying you must continue in worldly actions, but surrendering them all, in other words, to me, and having no claim for the reward or the fruits or the outcome. And while surrendering, and so continue engage in worldly actions while surrendering them all to me, living in me, concentrating on me, thinking always of me, fix thy mind on me, and by my grace you shall overcome all obstacles in your path on your journey and rise from human to the divine. So the last four sentences, Jackie, the last four sentences, they're beautiful, aren't they? I'll read them again. Surrender to me, live in me, concentrate on me, think always of me, fix your mind on me, and by my grace. This is the grace of, in the Christian teaching says, by the grace of God. Yeah, this is the grace. It's the sattvic, pure energy of sattva in the creation that will is the reward for everyone doing this work to whatever extent they're doing it. It'll help you overcome all obstacles in your path on your journey and rise from the human to the divine. So that's that final transformation in self-realization or enlightenment. So I'll just give the exercise for the people, Jackie, if anyone interested. I'd just like you to, on this last page or last segment that I read, give full focus this week on how you're using these four disciplines, how you're acting, how you're using your knowledge, whether it's buddhi or egoic knowledge, devotion and meditation. So pretty simple, but pretty powerful, and plenty there to observe. But the observations are very useful because it says, well, I'm doing pretty well, I think. So that's encouragement. You might be doing well on 3 and you say, well, I think I need to pick up a bit more on this one. And so it gives you a lead into something that needs focusing or special attention. All right, Jackie, what have you got anything to say that you'd like to say to finish off?
No, just a lovely exercise. I think self-observation and self-analysis are important tools in the learning spiritual journey. So a good exercise.
All right. Well, I'm done.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for the teachings for today. We are getting closer to the end, everybody. My goodness, what a long exploration of spiritual study we've been exploring this year. So
the next session, Jackie and listeners, is part 4 of chapter 18, and that'll be the end of the teachings. So our next podcast, our next meeting, we'll finish the 18 chapters, and then the last podcast will be a sort of a synopsis and a tidying up of it all and just a conclusion sort of session,
yeah,
which
lovely.
I'm sure everyone will enjoy and get a lot out of as well.
Yes.
All right, Jackie.
Lovely. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.